All right, we are live. Welcome to our channel, Philo Sapiens, where we critically examine the claims and concepts of religions, from the metaphysical or the philosophical underpinnings of theological arguments to the social and political implications of religious beliefs. We delve into the complexities and challenges of religious thought. So, tonight we have a special stream and a special guest on the show for a thought provoking discussion on the challenging topic of gratuitous animal suffering and its implications for the existence of a good God. We'll delve into the arguments for and against the compatibility of animal suffering with an all powerful, all knowing, and all good deity. We have Phil tonight on our show. Phil Halper is a content creator on YouTube who presents deep topics relating to science, specifically cosmology and evolution, through his channel Skydivephil. Now I think it's named Phil Halper. Phil has produced video series on Kalam cosmological arguments and fine-tuning argument with eminent scientists and cosmologists of the world, namely Sir Roger Penrose, Alan Guth, and Abhay Ashtekar. Phil has also co-authored a paper in International Journal for Philosophy of Religion on animal suffering. Phil is an avid astrophotographer when he's not busy making content for the YouTube. Please welcome Phil Halper.
Hi, how are you doing?
Phil, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Really glad to have you on. Yeah, we're all doing good. Yeah. So Phil, to start off with, I think we all have been watching your videos for a long time. How did you get into this?
I got into YouTube. Actually, it's because of Speaker's Corner. I don't go there very often, but occasionally I do. And one time I met these guys. It was I think it was 2010, 2011, something like that. And they were advocating a sort of anti-evolutionist stance. And in fact, there was a Muslim apologist back then called Adam Dean, and he was very popular. So because they thought I was a pretty good speaker, they invited me to debate him. And he was sort of trying to debunk evolution by misquoting a whole bunch of scientists like Stephen Jay Gould. And I sort of made a video. I decided, well, I'm going to make a video pointing out his errors. And that started things off. But actually, cosmology was kind of a big love for me. So I started making videos with cosmologists explaining different ideas about the early universe. So as you said, Alan Guth, Abhay Ashtekar, Roger Penrose, Stephen Hawking as well. Loads. Basically, I managed to interviewing, a lot of the leading figures in the field. So that took off and that became very popular and keep on going. And now we've just started a show called the Sci-Fi Show, so science and philosophy, with Alex Malpass and Dan Linford, who are two just stellar atheist philosophers. They're really top of the game. So that's
indeed. I have listened to them on your stream, and they are phenomenal, to be honest. Yeah, and we had Joe last week as well, probably a week or week and a half back or so, I think. So, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
That's Joe Schmidt, I presume.
Yeah, Joe Schmidt. Yeah.
He's awesome. He's incredible.
All right, and I think before that, let me also welcome my co-hosts Mahaden and Kelly. How are you two doing?
Yeah, we're very enthusiastic about this particular stream. As Phil has already said so, I've been watching Phil for a while. In fact, my first time encountering Phil was when I watched him debate Muhammad Hijab. And I remember at the time thinking, again, Muhammad Hijab's probably talking to some lay atheist. When I say lay atheist, I mean one of those atheists who's not philosophically not aware, perhaps. It's going to go down that route where he's going to talk about philosophy, and Phil's just whoever this person is, this guy called Phil, he's not going to know what to talk about. But then I watched it and I thought, actually, he knows what he's saying. He's saying some of the things that I would like an atheist to say. And I thought, all right, this guy's pretty impressive. And that's how I got into Phil's videos. And since then, I think that was like 2018, 2019-ish. And since then, I've watched many other videos of him talking to quite a few other Dawa heads, if you want to call it. And yeah, he really stumped people. He talked about cosmology with them, and they just didn't know really what to say. They didn't know the science behind it. and it showed a lot of showed that philosophy is on its own when it comes to scientific matters. You know, you can't just do things a priori from your armchair and just do all this kind of, you know, causality. This does this, and it will apply beyond the. It doesn't work like that. And yeah, that's how I got into Phil, and it's amazing that we've got him on the stream, and hopefully this will be amazing. Yeah, Kylie, do you want to?
So hang on, that debate with Mohammed Hijab,
Yeah.
was that the one where I did the breakdancing at the end?
Yes, that's the one. That's the one I watched, and yeah, you kind of humbled Hijab. I remember Mohammed Hijab was a little bit irate throughout the debate. He seemed a bit. He was very eccentric in the debate. He was moving around a lot. You know, he got up and started screaming loudly, and you could tell that he was I would say outmatched. I was going to say matched, but outmatched. Reality is I personally don't think people like Mohammed Hijab and so on, they really know what they're talking about when it comes to science. And it was good to find somebody who was aware of philosophy and aware of cosmology. Right? I know your speciality isn't philosophy, but I think when you know cosmology, you can say a lot of things to philosophers to educate them, and that was good. So yeah, that was that stream, and it was really entertaining to watch. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, Kylie.
My introduction to Phil, I think, was it was a while back. I think I saw his video where he was discussing again on Speaker's Corner with Subboor Ahmed on evolution, I believe, and I think he was regurgitating his same argument. I mean, Subboor was about how homology is an assumption for evolution.
Subboor has evolution. Subboor and evolution never parted ways.
Exactly. So I think that was my introduction to Phil. Yeah, I really enjoyed that video, so I'm really excited for today as well.
All right. So what we're gonna do, Phil, is I'm gonna hand over the baton to Madin, and probably we're gonna. What I'm thinking is we'll just go, just a casual conversation, and then see where it leads. And what I'm hoping is if there are callers who want to ask questions, would you have enough time? We can probably decide it towards the end if you have
fine,
time.
Yeah.
Right.
I can do about an hour, maybe a tad more, not a lot more, but yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Let's see where. Okay, Madan.
Yeah. So on this stream, obviously, we're going to be talking about animal suffering and specifically gratuitous suffering. And I imagine that's a subset of the problem of evil. I mean, it's broadly the problem of evil, which is, if I can just quickly for our viewers kind of state, is that there's so much evil or suffering in this world is incompatible or inconsistent with a benevolent and just God, just compassionate God. So it's like a generic attack generic attack on a good God. And it's applicable to an Islamic deity, it's applicable to a Christian deity, it's applicable to deities beyond that, and maybe even more. And I think the concept of suffering is emphasized a lot when you focus in on animal suffering, precisely because animals have been here. Well, we are animals, but non-human animals have been here far longer, and they have been suffering. They've been in carnage. They've been in survival mode for a very long time, and many species have gone extinct. And the main element that animal suffering showcases is the fact that the typical justifications or defenses that theologians and theist philosophers usually use to defend against the problem of evil, which are the Theodicies, do not neatly apply to in the context of animal suffering, right? And I think that is, I think you've written a paper on this, and I think, is that correct? Yeah, yeah. And I think
I've written a couple of papers. One was on the technical neuroscience side of things. That was in the journal Philosophical Psychology, and then we wrote one more on the theology side of things. That was in the International Journal for the Philosophy of Religion. So there was 2 papers there on animal suffering.
Yeah. And I think the conclusion of your paper is, if you want to just tell our audience what exactly you were arguing.
Right. So the technical one was like whether animals do suffer. So we went into the neuroscience there, and that didn't mention or barely mention theology. The second one was more about the theology. So we called this problem the expanded problem of animal suffering. And what we was trying to argue in the paper was that the problem of animal suffering is even worse than people have imagined, that other philosophers have described in the literature. It's particularly bad for the Christian God. May to some extent affect the Islamic God as well. Well, it certainly does some of it. Whether it all does is a slightly different question. But we highlighted sort of 5 problems. So one we called the problem of time, which is how long animals. I say animals, we mean non-human animals. So from now on, I'll just say animals. So animals have been here for hundreds of millions of years before humans were around. So certainly in Christianity, they attribute, the most popular explanation for suffering is the fall, Adam and Eve. But people, until recently didn't know that animals were around for an enormously long period of time before humans. And so that you can't attribute it to the fall. So if that's your explanation for suffering, you're in serious trouble. The second one we call the problem of creation, which is that not just evolution, but also catastrophe are the main means by which we got here. So, if the mass extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs didn't happen, then highly likely we wouldn't be here. So why would God use such means? I mean, it's because some theists are happy to embrace the natural history of the earth as described by science. So they embrace evolution, they embrace the catastrophes that have happened. I mean, so they accept that they happened, is what I mean. But the problem is, if that was God's means to get to us, then why would he choose such violent means? It seems completely unreasonable. So that's the problem of creation. Then we have the problem of divine commands, which is that God commands the suffering of animals. So obviously the great flood, human sin, but drowns all the animals as well as the people. That seems grossly unfair. The 10 plagues, the first plague is to turn all the water into blood and all the fish in the river die. The last plague, it's not just the firstborn humans that are killed, but their cattle too. So God has these commands sorry, that's the problem of divine actions. That is the problem of divine action. Sorry. The problem of divine commands is when he commands humans to make animals suffer. So, for example, he commands what's called hoffing horses of the enemy. Hoffing a horse is when you sever the Achilles tendon of the horse, is to disable it in battle. That's a horrendous torture. God could have disabled those horses, via supernatural means. He could have just put them to sleep. He could have teleported them away from the battle. He could have caused them to run away. There's all sorts of non-violent means that he could have used, but he didn't. He gives commands. Perhaps the most famous one might be the slaughter of the Canaanites. And a lot of atheists make a big deal out of the
Yeah, I
slaughter
was gonna go there basically. Yeah.
Yeah, but what they don't often mention is that the animals are slaughtered as well. They're killed. They're commanded to be slaughtered. And in the case of the Amalekites, Saul spares some of the animals, and God is angry with him. So that's particularly egregious. Then you get the last problem we call the problem of the Anthropocene. So right now there appears to be a mass extinction event happening caused by human actions, and in particular the fact that we eat meat. Why didn't God, he's made lots of animals unable to metabolize meat. There's, cows can't metabolize meat, elephants can't do so. Why didn't you just make humans in the same way? And that would have reduced animal suffering enormously and stopped this mass extinction event that's happening. Well, surely God would know this was coming. He'd have the ability to do it. It's a very minor tweak to our metabolism. So these are the 5 problems. And what we argue is the different Theodicies, and for those that don't know, Theodicy is a sort of response to the problem of evil, if you like. They might be able to solve 1 or 2 of these problems, but they can't. It's very hard for them to solve all of them. And we say, well, the simplest explanation for all 5 of these problems is that an omni-god. So I say omni-god. That means when it's omnipotent, they can do anything. They're omnibenevolent. They're all good. They're omniscient. They know everything. So an omni-god doesn't exist is the simplest, explanation for these 5 problems. So that's what we argue in the paper.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's something that our viewers should read into. And so if you want to send a link or something to your paper, people probably would.
Yep. We'll
So
I'll
what
send you a
I'll do
link.
is,
The paper is called The Expanded Problem of Animal Suffering, or is it Neo-Cartesianism?
yeah,
Neo-Cartesianism and the Expanded Problem of Animal Suffering.
yeah, it's a mistake on my part that I should be showing first thing first Phil's YouTube channel, so which I'm going to be presenting right away, and I should have also shown his paper basically, right? So this is, can you guys see it? This is Phil's channel. I think Phil, did you? Was it only named Skydivephil earlier,
It
and
was.
then
I
you
wanted to
changed
be
the name?
anonymous back in the past.
Okay.
Mainly because my wife had 2 religious grandmothers, and one of them lived to 103, but she
Oh,
died
okay.
recently, and so we didn't want to sort of offend her and get
Okay,
into so I kept it anonymous. But after she died, I've been using my real name now, so I'm out in the open.
Okay. So she lived to be a centenarian, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
That's an amazing feat, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so anybody who's listening, Phil's channel, you should check out, and especially if you want to learn about the science behind the Kalam cosmological argument and why it doesn't work. Basically, the argument doesn't work because of the body of science and evidence that we have. So you'll see tons and tons of videos that Phil and his team basically has made. I think later on Dan Linford and Alex Malpass have also joined and talked about this. And then the second one is his paper, the paper that Phil just mentioned. It's with Kenneth Williford, David Rudroff, and Perry and Fuchs, basically, and that's the Cartesianism and the expanded problem of animal suffering. So please do check it out, and support his channel any which way you can, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean,
all right, yeah, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, then, if you're going to go into the meat of it, some people may say that animal suffering can be justified and/or it's compatible with an omnigod, as you put it, and they might typically churn out the typical reasons, which are very similar to the reasons applied to human suffering. So let's like start off with something like they may say, and initially you'd straight away think this is not applicable in the domain of animals, but I'll explain how it possibly can be. So Alvin Plantinga comes out with something called the free will defense, and that's the idea is that human suffering can be justified and it's logically compatible with a omnigod. And the reason for that is because some forms of human suffering involves agents, inflicting pain on others, doing horrendous acts, criminal acts, sinful acts, rape, torture, etc. But the reason why a good omnibenevolent God allows these sort of suffering is because of free will. Without free will, we will be robots, basically. We'll be machines, and therefore, if we're machines, then there won't be any sort of goodness, at least from an agent. We can't. Our charitable actions will be meaningless. They will because we don't have the free will to decide between right and wrong. The fact that I can discriminate between right and wrong and decide to do the right thing, that allows humans to do good. And for goodness to exist of that form, I need to have the ability to do evil. The fact that I resist the temptation to do evil and then do a good thing allows for that goodness. So we can't just be made into machines or puppets. We need to be cut from our strings and have the agency to do evil. And this is why a good omnibenevolent God who wants to have humans or agents do good allows us to do evil and doesn't stop it, right? So let's try and apply that Plantinga argument in the context of animal suffering. And straight away, it doesn't seem to apply because well, even if from a theological basis, animals don't have that sort of agency, right? They can't. They don't have the sophisticated intelligence, let's say, to be able to choose between right and wrong. They kind of they operate based on instinct. So straight away, the free will defense doesn't apply in the sphere of animals. However, Plantinga, this is me being creative with what Plantinga may say, or you could say I'm trying to steel man Plantinga's argument. And the reason I say this is because Plantinga actually makes a similar sort of argument. I think he's already done this. I'm not 100% sure. I think he says there could be angels or something like that being. I think does he say that?
No, he says there are two an evil being as the planter of evil or suffering, basically. So not the god, basically. That's his, I think.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, that demon, it's basically satanic fall. So
Satanic
fall of
fall.
Satan
Yes, exactly.
is-
Yeah, exactly.
but of course,
yeah.
Satan was an angel in some versions of.
Yeah, but he thinks that they are two different things. They are not. I mean, God hasn't created Satan or something of that sort. Probably, I think that's how he tries to justify that. Basically,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the idea that it's kind of like skeptical theism. So what Plantinga is trying to do is trying to. I think he's trying to mainly look for a logical possibility, a logically possible scenario, even if it's not consistent with the evidence, that there might be some sort of hidden reason or something, right?
Well, I think
That's-
you should distinguish between a defense and a theodicy. So a defense in this context is, something that's logically possible. Well, we can't rule it out. A theodicy is a bit more stronger than that. It's like, this is a good reason that God would have to allow certain sufferings. But I think it's different to the skeptical theist approach, because he actually is saying, that this is what happened. He does say that Satan fell and that broke the world and that caused suffering. So that's different to skeptical theism, where you say, well, we don't know what God's reasons are, but we have other reasons to believe in God, so we'll just assume that there is a good reason.
Yeah, that's right. So how would you respond to those sort of arguments in terms of that there might be a possibility or something like that, and then he comes out with some sort of narrative like Satan or whatever?
Yeah,
So
well, I think there's loads of problems with it. See if I can remember them all. First problem is this is going to make Satan the author of our creation, because the evolutionary process is really violent. And again, it's not just evolution, but it's the catastrophes of mass extinctions. These are really violent processes. So if you want to blame that on Satan, then that's going to make Satan like the author of our creation, because it's how we got here. If evolution didn't happen, if these catastrophes didn't happen, we wouldn't be here. So if you're going to accept that narrative, of the scientific narrative of how we got here, and then say Satan's responsible, that's going to make Satan the author of our creation. Surely a theist doesn't want to say that. Second problem is that it's sort of violating principles of parsimony. So, we've got this issue of, why should we believe in this invisible God? Well, okay, maybe you've got some reasons to believe that. Oh, but that's incompatible with something that we see, i.e., with the gratuitous suffering in the world. So how are we going to explain that? Well, we'll invent another invisible thing. So basically, it's an additional auxiliary hypothesis. And in philosophy, if you add additional auxiliary hypotheses, that's got to lower the probability of your argument. So it's a very bad argument. Third problem is what I call the problem of redundancy. So it's the same problem as with the regular fall. Like I like skydiving, as you probably guessed. So if you have a problem with your main parachute, you have a reserve parachute. We've built redundancy into our system, as it were. So I also have a visual altimeter, and if that fails, I have an audible altimeter, something that bleeps in my ear. So we have, if you go on an airplane, they have like 3 computer systems. So if one fails, you've got a backup, and then a backup for the backup. So how can it be that God designs the world such that it's so fragile that the fall of like one being or a few beings is going to cause such havoc, for billions and billions of sentient creatures. It seems like terrible design. And then you also have the problem that Alvin Plantinga likes to run what's called the evolutionary argument against naturalism. What he says is that, the way that we sort of got here, if it was evolution, then we wouldn't have reliable cognitive faculties. That's his argument. Now, if Satan is responsible for how we got here, that means Satan's responsible for our cognitive faculties. So there's going to be a serious problem with his evolutionary argument. Last problem I would highlight is that it's just inconsistent with the text that he believes in. Plantinga believes in the Bible, and the Bible doesn't mention any of this pre-Adamic fall. The fall happens with Adam. There is no fall of Satan. That's just not. It's not in the Old Testament. Like it's just snake that tempts Adam and Eve. It's not Satan. Satan is in the Old Testament is not really the character that you get in the New Testament or in the Quran. That's a sort of later addition. If such a monumental event did happen, and Genesis tells a story of the monumental events that led to humans, it's just incredible that it's not mentioned. So that would be my main objections to Plantinga's argument.
Yeah,
Right,
that
right.
Adam and Eve story almost sounds like a comical story, as if the devious plan has been devised by the God himself, pretty much, right? I mean, that's the whole story, pretty much there. But anyways, I think we are moving.
Yeah, and everything that Phil's been saying is, I think, even that sort of defense with Satan involved in whatever, that's just more applicable to possibly a Christian narrative. When you look at it from the Islamic, that will be straightforwardly rejected. Wouldn't that make the case, Kylie? The idea that Satan is responsible for all of this suffering for animals, right? You can't forge an interpretation where Satan is behind all of that, the author of all that.
Yeah. I think the main Islamic theodicy is that is most popularly presented is the generally the version of for general problem of evil or problem of suffering is that this world is a test. Now, when it comes to animals, now they cannot find any sort of for the test theodicy for that applies to humans, and that they can find in Quran. So that is something that they can actually claim that is in the Quran. But when it comes to animals, now that is a problem that they, as far as I know, they cannot find any resolution for that in their book, neither in Quran or Hadith. So they do come up with different things, and many of those explanations or theodicies are in line with what Christians say. Of course, the Satan version is not their version. Uh, some argue that they don't feel that much pain. Some say that they will be compensated in the in the afterlife. So these are the kind of theodicies. I think there are a few, one or two more. There are very few who say that they do not feel pain at all, because but I have heard that argument as well. But these are the kind of explanations or theodicies that they provide. But all of them has problems, even when you compare or when you see them in light of Islamic rulings as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in here for a second? And what I think is
I
what
think
we should do is
Phil,
probably list, right?
Phil,
Yeah.
I think
What
Phil
I'm
wanted to say
thinking,
something. So I think Phil wanted to say something. So if you want to,
Phil, sorry,
before you
you
go.
wanted to say
Oh,
something on.
Yeah.
no, it's fine. Whatever you want to say. We should probably go through those things, the test.
Yeah,
And
that's what I wanted to say, that those
compensation,
we
blah,
should
blah, blah.
list those theodicies first. Phil, you should go ahead and maybe list all those theodicies that apply to this, uh,
Oh, well, okay.
the
A
problem
quick
of
list
evil,
of all the
basically, and then
theodicies.
whether
Well,
they apply to the animal suffering or not, basically. Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's loads. There's the pre-Adamic fall. We just discussed that. There's soul building. There's gnomic regularity. There's neo-Cartesianism. There's afterlife compensation, and there's the test. So I guess. Oh, and the skeptical theism, of course. That's probably the big one. The one that most
Right.
religious philosophers would fall back on is skeptical theism. So I don't know if you want to go through them one by one. Maybe we should do the test one first, because that's the one that I think Muslims tend to use. I don't know if that's what you think.
Yeah. So that is the most popular one, but they find it difficult to apply it on
I mean,
animals
they even use soul
because
building as well, right? Soul
Yeah.
yeah, they
building
do
is
the
one.
soul building, and test is there's an overlap in that explanation. I feel like there's a sort of an overlap in that, but of course there is some distinct
Yeah.
features of each theodicy, but there's an overlap. But neither of them applies to animals
Yeah.
generally, even in the Islamic view, because uh, you know generally speaking, most Islamic most Muslims and most Muslim scholars believe that animals do not have an eternal life, in even if they will have sort of a paradise, but that will be very temporary, because they'll be compensated for whatever harm they suffered in this world, but that will be temporary, and then they will end, and then they will sort of you know be sent into non-existence. So that is the kind of, I think the popular one is that they will be compensated when it comes to animals. The test
I think
theodicy, of course, applies
greater
to
good
animals.
is one more. Greater
The
good is
greater
one.
good, yeah. So they would appeal to could you call the skeptical theism as well, particularly when it comes to animals, because they cannot find any good explanation for it. So I think that is another one. So the greater good one is kind of an appeal to skeptical theism, because they don't know what the greater good is, but they appeal to it.
All right. So
Okay.
let me talk about the test one first. So this seems really implausible, because, as you said, animals don't have quite the cognitive capacities that humans have. So they do rely more on instinct. That's not to say they don't have cognitive capacities. Some in some cases, very impressive cognitive abilities, but it does vary. I mean, something like a dolphin or a chimpanzee has very, very impressive cognitive capacities. Crows, but others, less less so. So the idea they're being tested, you need some sort of sophisticated cognitive capacities to do a sort of test like that. So that just seems implausible in some species of animals, not in all, but in some. The second one is that when you do a test, they should be fair. Test should be fair. So if you had a maths exam and one person has what's 1 + 1 = 2, and the other one says solve this complicated integral equation, you just think that's not fair. People should have a fair test. And obviously, some animals experience vastly more suffering than others. And it doesn't seem, you might imagine, okay, some tests could be unequal because other people have different capacities, but it doesn't look like the inequality of suffering has any relationship to sort of capacity to withstand suffering. The other thing is tests also should be voluntary. So there's a now, have you ever seen a TV show called what's it called? SAS Who Dares Wins, I think. So in this show, they get civilians to do a sort of made-for-TV version of Special Forces selection. It's very tough, and they all have armbands with a number on them. That they're given a number, and they say, right, if you want to withdraw from the test because it's too hard for you, you just take off your armband. You say, I voluntarily withdraw, because not everyone can cope. But of course, life isn't like that. You shouldn't have to do a tough test if you don't consent to it. That's what we would expect normally in life. So I think this test theodicy just it doesn't work in humans, quite frankly, and it doesn't work in animals even more. So that's
Are,
my
are
reading.
you are you aware about the Muslim response to this particular
Yeah, that's
objection, that is about there should be voluntary? So I'm not sure if you're aware that there's a verse in Quran which says that so souls humans were asked whether they want to be tested or not, and according to Quran it says that yes, humans were asked, and they said, yeah, we are going to take this test. Now we don't have that memory. According to them, the memory has been wiped wiped out by God.
very conveniently so.
Well,
Very
yeah, then it's
conveniently.
a question of parsimony, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's like saying, look, did you not know your apartment, everything was stolen and replaced with exact replicas? You know, um, yeah, it's possible, right? Logically possible, but it's just like it would look exactly as if your apartment wasn't robbed.
Right.
So um, therefore, why should we take this seriously?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is also how I approach the problem of evil. It's more of an abductive or an inductive case, whatever you want to call it, a probabilistic case. You don't
Yeah.
want to take what you can think of logical possibilities for everything. So this is how I kind of approach problem of evil arguments, and I apply it in the sphere of animals as well. So suppose Jeffrey Dahmer commits a crime, right? Which he has, and
Maybe not everyone knows who he is. He was someone that was convicted of killing and eating various people.
exactly. Right, absolutely, absolutely. And he then gets charged and prosecuted, and he goes through the proceedings, and he's found guilty, and so on and so forth. And maybe one of his defenses in before he got found guilty was that it's logically possible that there was, and he comes out with anything, like it could be that he was operating under self-defense. But none of the evidence supports this. None of the evidence supports this. There's no evidence of this. He just says it's logically possible, and he thinks that's his case. Well, everybody would laugh at him. The judge would go, well, when you produce evidence that there was self-defense involved, then maybe we can give you a retrial. Until then, you are found guilty. And that's how I kind of approach the problem of evil as well, right? We have this case, and we have a lot of evidence marshaled disfavoring a good, benevolent, omnipotent God. And the best evidence suggests that there isn't any justification for these things. Now, we can conjure up all of these fantastical possibilities, like maybe this, maybe that, but none of the evidence supports that. And that's how I approach the problem of evil. And I think it applies to the case of animal suffering. We can think of all of these logically possible scenarios. You may even say that it's logically possible that the current science is false, and animals just don't suffer, or they have souls in order to strengthen the soul building theodicy. You can come out with all of these things, but if the evidence is not in support of that, that is the case, and God would be found guilty, and we would say, no, God. When you're saying you're a benevolent deity, you're not. So clearly you're not. You can't be. Philo, by the way, I don't know what happened then. Yeah, so I think approaching the problem of evil in that way is a much better way of doing things, and I don't think therefore any conjuring up logical possibilities is sufficient at all. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Logical possibility is trivial, right? Anything might be true. So as you said, right, think of anything. Think of the most evil thing you can imagine, like Hitler and the Holocaust, or Stalin and the gulags, or whatever, pick your favorite. Is there some, logical possibility that there's some justification for this? Yeah, of course, right? You can always imagine something. But why on earth should we take that seriously? So imagine I've got evidence. There's evidence against someone that they've committed a crime. Imagine there's video evidence. There's loads of witnesses. Their fingerprints are at the crime scene. The boot's imprint matches their shoe size, blah, blah, blah. Everything matches them. And they go to trial and they say, oh, it wasn't me. It was my twin. Maybe I've got a genetically identical twin. And okay, that's logically possible. They could have, right? Now you say, well, do you have any evidence there is a genetically identical twin? No. Right, you're going to jail. There's just no reason to think logical possibility is very important. What we want is the evidence. Where does the evidence stack up?
Yes.
And
yes.
if it looks gratuitous, then you assume it is gratuitous unless you've got some counter evidence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And what if we go down that route of sort of a skeptical theism, where you think that there's it's a possibility that God could have good reasons for this, then I think then there's a bigger problem for these theists, because now they don't know anything is possible. Now it might be possible that God might be lying to us for good reason. Now what is good in that context, I don't know. It could mean anything. Maybe he is lying to Christians that he'll send all these Christians to heaven, or all these Muslims to heaven if they believe in their religion. Maybe God is lying. It's just, and he had good reasons for that. Maybe he'll throw all of these people into hell. I mean, and
Maybe
if
atheists will go to heaven.
maybe,
I've
yeah,
got,
yeah,
got
exactly.
an idea about
Because
this.
they thought
Yeah.
out everything, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe
Yeah,
all these
exactly.
religions are sort of a test. If all these religions were sort of a confusion created by God to test those humans, whether they use their mental capacities to skeptically, to be a bit skeptic, to question their worldview and actually arrive at the conclusion that no, these religions are not true, and actually, those are the kind of people that God will actually reward. So I think, if you want to go down that route, then fine. This is where it will take you.
Yeah, so I've always thought I've had a bit of fun with this idea that basically exactly what you said. Like, imagine God gives you moral instincts, so you know certain things are right and wrong, right? Then He gives you
Yeah.
a holy book. Some of the things in it are good, and some of the things in it are bad. And He's testing you. He wants you to condemn the things in it that are bad and praise the things in it that are good, right? And those religious people that just praise everything in it, they failed God's moral test, and so He's going to send them all to hell. And the atheists that can see, the good things and the bad things and appropriately judge them, He's like, yeah, God's going there on my team. That's the sort of person I want with me in heaven. Someone that can make, reasonable moral judgments. So I there's like a twist on this. Basically, people like Dawkins are going to heaven, and all the religious
Yeah.
apologists are going to hell.
Yeah.
But the other thing about skeptical theism is that it sort of undermines theism in general, right? In a different way. So think of it this way. Imagine you see something bad, some gratuitous suffering, and you go, look, that's incompatible with God. God wouldn't allow gratuitous suffering. And you say, well, there might be some good reason that I don't know about. So I can't say that it's really bad. When I say really bad, I kind of mean net bad. Like when you add up all the goods and the bads that accrue from this action, net, it's going to be good because God is good, right? So you can say that, that's logically possible. But the same thing will apply to the opposite case. So imagine you see something good that you think God has done, right? So imagine someone has leukemia, a little child is dying of cancer. You pray and then the leukemia goes away and they're better. So you might say, praise God for His wonderful miracle. But hang on a sec, you don't know the full picture of reality. Maybe that child that was saved is going to grow up to be the next Hitler, or the next Donald Trump,
Yeah.
So actually what appeared to be good, you can't really say is good. So you
Yeah.
won't be able to say that anything God does is really good because you don't have epistemic access to
Absolutely.
I think you can fit in Stephen Law's evil God challenge in there as well. I mean, exactly, you can argue from both the sides. Basically, if you know some certain goods, why it's been done, basically you can have an evil God behind it.
Yeah.
Basically, luring into doing good
Yeah.
things to punish you for the worst hellfire or with the worst hellfire. Basically, make you suffer in the worst possible ways. Right.
Yeah.
It goes both ways. Basically, once you go into that route of path of
Mhm.
skeptical theism. Madan, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like as you said, I mean, Stephen Law, when he gets to this, he comes out with the Pandora's box objection, which is going down the route of skeptical theism leads to global skepticism, and it's not just about good and evil. Like as you said, you can't if you can't assess what seems like plainly evil as evil, you can't call it out as evil because there might be some hidden good. Then clearly, you can't say that what is clearly good is clearly good either. It might be for an evil reason. But then he goes above and beyond that to say that if it's the case that our epistemic limits are such that we can't access what reasons God has, then it could just be that all of our knowledge, not just about morals and moral conduct and behavior and so on, but all of our knowledge can be an illusion. It could be like a matrix or something, or hallucination or whatever. We can't know anything, including the Quran, the Bible. All of these things are we can't look up. So the point is, it's like we can't. I think certain philosophers called it, what's it called, ad nauseum inference or something, nauseum inference. You can't look at what's in our face, which is the abundance of these seemingly evil acts, and make the conclusion that this is actual evil simply because that's an unjustified inference. It's an unjustified inference is because we have finite imaginations. God has infinite imagination, and God has infinite knowledge. And to suggest that from our limited faculties, we can conclude that this is actual evil is to surpass God's infinite knowledge, right? But that sort of model of thinking applies to anything and everything, including just knowledge about evolution, knowledge about the Christianity, knowledge about the Quran, knowledge about the Prophet Muhammad. All of these things. So I can't make an inference as it is. So the fact that the angel Gabriel communicated with the Prophet Muhammad, right? That seemingly looks as though it happened. But why should I use my finite imagination to conclude it actually did happen, right? It could very well be that that's an hallucination, right? So if it doesn't, they don't want to consistently apply it there because it will cut off the branch they're sitting on, right? Right? It'll cut off their entire, But technically speaking, if you go down the route of skeptical theism, you end up in this kind of global skepticism, and it's self-defeating. So that's what Stephen Law says, and that's probably one of the strongest arguments against skeptical theism.
Yeah, and also, I also think it leads to moral paralysis. So imagine there's some evil act, some gratuitous suffering that you think you can stop. Should you stop it? Let's say it costs you nothing to do so, and you can stop it. Seems like the obvious thing to do is to stop it. But you might think to yourself, hang on, though, God isn't stopping it. So there must be some greater good that is happening. So I won't stop it either. In which case you shouldn't stop it.
That's always a problem
Yeah.
that you can get stuck with.
You might be messing up things. You might be messing it
You
up.
don't want
even
to.
more.
You don't want to save that child who's drowning in the pond because there is a greater good to be had there. And who knows? You are messing up the God's greater plan.
Let me try to strengthen the theist side for a little bit. So people like William Lane Craig would avoid all of this sort of thinking, right? They would say that we don't determine God's goodness or badness or whatever you want to call it from the data of the world, right? So they would go down a different route through the back door, right? They will say that we can establish maybe through the moral argument or the ontological argument that God is good, right? It's like an analytical truth. We come to arriving that there must be a God and that God is good. Once we've established that, then when we look at the world data and all of this gratuitous suffering, now we can say that we know for a fact that a good God exists. So none of the world data, none of this abductive case that you're making is going to undermine anything. Because once we've established that there's a good God, then it gives more leeway to all of these Theodicies. Because the data doesn't, although it seems to contradict a good God, they think the deductive or the analytical argument, like the ontological argument, moral argument, is a stronger basis to hold on to firmly that there is a good God. So no amount of suffering in the world is going to undermine that. So if there is suffering, it has to be reconcilable, and that's how they kind of bring in through the back door that, look, if you see all this suffering, that doesn't mean that we don't know God is good. We know God is good because of the moral argument, the ontological argument. Yeah. Therefore, this suffering has to be consistent with that. And here's some consistent explanations. And that's where the logical possibilities gets a bit more force. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can flip the argument though, right? You could just say, well, look, we know from the animal suffering argument that good God doesn't exist. So the ontological argument must be flawed. Same with the moral argument. They must be flawed because so you can just flip these things around. I also think that, prioritizing a priori arguments over evidence seems pretty crazy to me. Like,
I think that's
surely we
your
make
stance.
progress
I've
in
heard.
the world because we look at the evidence. And if you want to just discard the evidence, you're living in, some kind of fantasy land. Furthermore, the moral argument and the ontological argument are not considered good arguments, even by, most philosophers who might be sympathetic to some religious arguments. I mean, they're just the moral argument in particular. I think there was a survey in Phil Papers And I think moral and ontological arguments came like bottom of the best arguments for God. So, but better arguments would be like the design argument. I think the cosmological argument was the favored one. It was just they just asked people to rank the best arguments for God. So they could be atheists. You know, you can be an atheist and still rank arguments for God. So that one's better than that one. The moral argument, I don't think even establishes that God is good. Like, it's perfectly plausible that a morally indifferent God gave humans morality for some, you know, like maybe it's an experiment, or you could be an evil God
Yes.
who just thinks, well, I want to give you a sense of morality so that you can be particularly outraged when all this evil happens. You know, so it's perfectly
Yeah.
possible that I just don't think it follows, even if the moral argument is valid, that the God is good. Now, the ontological argument is basically saying there's a greatest being, right? That's really the argument. But to me, greatest just is not well defined. It could be the greatest evil being. You know, if any axis you consider, right, you can consider an opposite axis. So yeah, maybe the most knowledgeable God, you know, is great. But I could also just flip it and say, you know what, the most learned God is the greatest making property. In order to learn things, you have to not know stuff, right? You can't learn anything if you know everything already. So I might think great making property is learning stuff, and you might think that great making property is knowing stuff. And those are actually not consistent, because you can't learn anything at all if you know everything already. So I just think the ontological argument is ill-defined, because great making property is not a well-defined property.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
and
great
I
making property is subjective in a sense. Basically, you want all the great
right.
making properties as, goodness is subjective. Basically, it's our definition of goodness. But sorry, Kelly, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was saying that you see the primarily when you look into it, we are actually saying that the arguments that you're trying to give, the kind of argument that you're trying to prove God is the kind of, and you're trying to prove a good God from it, is incompatible with the kind of world we live in. So the ontological argument, if you're using that argument to prove that God is good, we are providing you an argument that, you see, if you look in the world, it does not seems to be the greatest god. It seems to be created by the greatest deity or greatest moral good being who would have created such a world. So if you're using that ontological argument to arrive at a god who's morally greatest and the absolute maximal and maximally good, we are using that we are showing the incompatibility with the between that concept of a god and the actual world that we live in. So I think it it kinds of is part and parcel of this argument that we are making. I mean, of course, just saying that whatever kind of what kind of argument they're using to prove a good god, we are saying that actually the evidence goes against it. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
imagine a world where every moment of every sentient being's life was just horrible suffering. There was no joy, no
yeah.
goodness, nothing pleasant. Imagine that was the world you observed, right?
Mm.
Would you go, well, you know what, though, we've got the ontological argument, so this isn't evidence against a good God. Basically, what you're saying is there can never be evidence against a good God. And
Mm.
any argument where you won't consider evidence seems just ridiculous to me, particularly about his claims about the world. There are arguments where a priori reasoning is okay, I think. Like in mathematics, you state axioms and you say this follows from that axiom. So that sort of reasoning is okay, but those aren't claims about the world, about what exists and what doesn't exist. Um, so when you make claims about what exists, and the claim that God, an omni-God exists, is such a claim, then I think you have to look at the world and see what it looks like. Yes,
Phil, there's a
yes, that probably
comment
is
for you.
me. Yeah, yep, yes, that was me.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, my bad. I removed it. Did you read it? Yes.
I saw the question. Yeah, yes, yes. I have debated Subboor on evolution, so that was probably me. Yes.
Or one thing,
Right.
I want to make a separation between Christianity and Islam, and this is maybe a later innovation, that the tri-omni attribute that is usually hallmark of Christianity. I think now when you talk to the Muslim apologists, they'll try to give you a flavor of maximally, good, maximally, potent, and all those. So they don't go like omni properties. They are just maximally, and so that they can, they can fit in these problem of evil pretty much. They're trying to sneak in those. One thing that I heard, Phil, in the debate, I think it's in on your video as well, that William Lane Craig tries to argue that the debate you had with Michael Murray, I think,
Michael Murray.
Murray, right? So he says that there are 3 stages of pain, basically, right? 3 degrees of pain, basically, and then animals kind of, just shove away this thing that the animals don't suffer, basically, right? Once you say that. You can apply Theodicies to human suffering, right? And you can say, okay, there are reasons we can agree with that. But animal suffering is such a problem because you cannot apply any of those Theodicies for gratuitous animal suffering, because they are not going to gain any of the, it's not going to fit into any of those. So the one resort they take is that they deny that animals suffer at all, pretty much, right? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, this argument goes back a long way. So the original version of this goes back, well, even to Aquinas, I guess.
Okay. That is
So it goes back
Aquinas
a long
is
way.
12th
There's different
century, I
versions
think.
of it. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, it goes back a long way, and there have been different versions of it. So, like, for example, Descartes denied that all animal mental life just didn't exist, that they were essentially like clockwork machines. Now, there's a newer version of this called Neo-Cartesianism. So Neo-Cartesianism differs from what Descartes suggested, in that they accept that animals are sentient, but they deny that they can feel pain. So the way that, and even when the 20th century, this goes back to like C.S. Lewis made a similar argument. So Craig was quoting Michael Murray, yeah, although he didn't, I think, understand what Murray was actually saying. But what Craig famous, Adam Dean, the Muslim apologist I mentioned at the beginning, sort of got me into all this. He ran this argument too. So the claim is that animals, other than like the higher primates, don't have a prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is needed for self-awareness. So animals aren't aware that they're in pain. That's basically the argument. Now, that's the argument that Craig presented. Now, it's slightly different to, he was quoting this guy called Michael Murray, another philosopher. And Murray didn't actually say that, to my knowledge. What he said was that you need this for what's called negative affect. So that's the word affect beginning with A. And affect is the emotional component of pain. So it's basically the sense that you dislike your pain, rather than you just sort of feel it as a sort of automatic response, stimulus evoke response. So let's deal with Craig first. So Craig's argument was what we debunked in our paper, because what happened was we found a patient. I say we, as my co-authors. They found a patient who didn't have a prefrontal cortex, and they tested his self-awareness, and amazingly, it was perfectly intact. So this totally destroys Craig's argument, because you only need like one black swan to disprove the claim that all swans are white, and essentially that's the type of claim that Craig was making. If someone doesn't have a prefrontal cortex and they still have self-awareness, it can't be the case that you need a prefrontal cortex for self-awareness. Furthermore, they also tested this patient's pain perception. Now, this relates to Murray's argument, because Murray was saying, he was inspired by lobotomy patients. So lobotomy was a procedure very popular in the 1950s. It's come into disrepute these days, but in the 50s it was popular to treat chronic pain, and you would sever the prefrontal cortex, which is a part of the brain that is involved in what's called executive function and working memory. It doesn't really matter what they are. The point is they severed this part of the brain, and apparently people said that they could feel pain, but they didn't mind it. Like, it didn't bother them anymore, which is a very weird statement to make. So Murray interpreted that as, well, then the prefrontal cortex must be necessary for this negative affect. And so animals that don't have it won't have it. So we can test this with this patient. It's called patient R, also known as Roger, because he's died now, so people use his first name. So Roger was tested for his pain perception and found to be hyperpathic to pain, which means he's overly sensitive to pain. Now, they don't actually torture the guy. So the standard test for pain perception is you put your hand in basically a bucket of very cold water, and you see how long it takes. You ask the person, you withdraw it whenever you like, but keep it in as long as you feel that you can. So it's up to you when you withdraw it, but we're measuring how much tolerance you have for pain. So if you can, keep it in too, but when you find it's intolerable for you, you take it out. So basically, like a special forces soldier will probably be able to keep their hand in the bucket quite long. Maybe a marathon runner who has quite high stamina, they could probably keep their hand in quite long. But Roger couldn't keep his arm in there at all. He withdrew it very, very quickly, and they weren't able even to get a brain scan, because when you do a brain scan, you have to keep still for a while, and he couldn't do that. So we showed that not only is Craig's claim about the prefrontal cortex, i.e. that you need self-awareness, was experimentally wrong, but Murray's claim also was experimentally wrong. Proven wrong by experimental evidence. Furthermore, these claims are actually inconsistent, because don't forget, Craig was quoting Murray, right? He thought that's what Murray said. But of course, if you need self-awareness for if you need the prefrontal cortex awareness, then those people without a prefrontal cortex can't report on their pain, right? Because if they're not self-aware, I can't tell you, well, yeah, right. It feels painful, but I don't really mind it. That's the statement.
Exactly.
They're being.
That's a paradoxical statement, because if you sorry to interrupt, I mean, just if you look what we mean by pain, it is the exact feeling that we don't want anymore. We want it to stop. If you say that this is a feeling that I'm having, but I don't mind it, that makes that feeling not pain anymore. So you could have, for example, there are people who are I think it's called masochists, right? So people who don't mind, who in fact draw pleasure from hurting themselves. Now those people actually don't feel pain, seemingly. So when they hurt, they don't feel pain. You won't call it pain. What they're feeling is pleasure. So you wouldn't call it that they're feeling pain but they don't mind it. No, they're not feeling pain from it. So you someone saying that I feel pain but don't mind it, that is an incorrect statement per se, because of the very definition of pain, I think.
Yeah. So what we did in our paper, in the scientific paper, not the theological one, we dug up the old case reports from lobotomy patients, and what they actually said was not that they don't feel pain, but rather, or they don't mind pain, rather their anxiety about their pain was what went away after the procedure. So, for example, imagine you feel a pain in your stomach, right? Someone that's very anxious might think, oh my God, cancer or something, I've got some horrible disease and I'm going to die. So there's an anxiety that can be associated with pain, right? So what went away was their anxiety, and it was only their anxiety about their chronic pain. So there are different types of pain. So acute pain is the sort of pain that you experience if you put your hand on a hot stove. It's very quick, rapid response. So that's called acute pain. Chronic pain is persistent pain over a long period of time. So, and there are other types of pain, like neuropathic pain, which is like a failure of the nervous system. So it was just their anxiety about their chronic pain that went away with the procedure. It just wasn't true that they said, oh, we don't mind our pain. I mean, even if they had said that, then what you might explain it away as, maybe they feel some feeling, like imagine they had a pain in their back, right? And it really hurts. Then they have the procedure and then they still feel something in their back, but maybe it doesn't really bother them anymore, but they still feel something, right? So maybe that could be how you might interpret what they were saying. But really, when we look at the case files, we know they didn't say that. It's just not true. In fact, Michael Murray quoted a book by a guy called Roger Trigg, and he went over these case files and he said, well, we know they felt pain because they took pain medication after they had painful stimuli. So, and Michael Murray just conveniently ignored all that, forgot to mention it.
Right.
I'm just conscious of the time and so on as well. But I want to quickly just say as well that all of this conversation regarding pain may be just irrelevant in the context of the Islamic case of animal suffering, simply because it doesn't seem to be the case that the Islamic narrative is denying the animal's capabilities of suffering, because the entire foundation when it comes to treatment of animals within Islam, if you look at it from slaughter methods, that it has to be halal, we have to cut or kill the animal in a humane in what they consider humane. They can't see other animals. The other animals cannot witness one of their fellows being killed in front of it. They have to be treated well. They have to be given nutrition and water. And if you have a pet, for example, and the pet is injured, you have to give it medical treatment. It's not consistent with the idea that animals cannot feel pain.
But that's not so for black dogs, by the way, Madan. So black dogs have to be killed.
There's a particular
wherever you find them,
superstition
wherever you
hadith
find them.
about black dogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So no, just kidding. You're right about everything. You're right.
It's about black dogs in Islam, Phil.
Yeah, there is
not black cats.
An immense.
Because I have a black cat, so.
Yeah.
No, cats are safe in Islam.
There is a hadith that whenever you see an animal, be kind to them. Basically,
I have another cat with an M on its forehead, which I believe some Muslims think means Muhammad.
Right. I mean, even if we take William Lane Craig's argument that they don't feel pain, I mean, this seems like really absurd that a good God, let's say the animals do suffer, but they are not self-aware that they are in pain. Basically, that's what his argument was, right? So they don't feel that they are suffering, basically, or feeling pain, but humans do, basically. So the problem
statement is very paradoxical. I mean, we are discussing it, yes, but saying
it's about
that
the phenomenal ability to basically feel pain, basically.
I mean,
right?
the idea would be that they're behaviorally suggesting that they're suffering, but they're not. It's like they're like machines.
Which means they're effectively
robots.
Effectively, it's a claim. It's effectively a simpler version would be to just say that they don't feel pain. Just saying that they feel pain, but they don't mind it, or they don't actually have a self-awareness of it. Wouldn't do you think that's? I don't know. That's
no. I'm saying let's grant them that. Let's grant them that.
Yes.
But then what's happening there is
I think
Phil
wants to explain something.
Humans feel pain, basically, right? And for them, nothing is happening, right? But then it's an gratuitous suffering on humans, because when they see animals in pain, they feel that the animals are suffering, and the pain transfers not to the animal, but instead to humans, and that's again gratuitous suffering, basically. I mean, you can extend that problem, grant them that, Steelman that their argument, basically his argument, and then you can still arrive at gratuitous.
They could argue against it.
Yeah.
But I think they could argue against it, because then they'd say that this is a test for humans. Because now you are talking about human.
No, but this the test could be extended.
Right?
You can say that you can do something with that test, basically, right? I mean, maybe go and save kids who are suffering. Where you can help. Here you're suffering, but you can't do anything for that, basically, right? There's no soul building in here, right?
I mean, they could make a case for it. They could say that no, it is making some sort of.
Again, you're going into that skeptical theism, basically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
I mean, they could still argue.
It's going to go against you, anyways, right?
Yes. But Phil wants to say something.
Yeah. So if I want to try and steelman Craig's argument for a minute, I think what he's trying to say is that the animals don't have what we might call metacognition. That's the claim he's making. So you don't have like these reflective thoughts about yourself. So I think, imagine like you hurt yourself, you step on a nail or something and you go, ow, it hurts. And then you start thinking about, oh my God, that's really painful. So maybe animals don't have these sorts of reflective thoughts, what you might call metacognition. First off, we actually have pretty good evidence animals do have metacognition. And secondly, I just don't see that you need it. Like if you have a really unpleasant experience, you don't need to have all these sort of complex reflective thoughts. about those experiences. You just have them. It's just unpleasant, and that's it.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Totally
But I
agree.
think if I want to steelman the argument, I think that's how you could try and make sense of what he's saying, that they are in pain, but they're not aware that they're in pain. I think what he's trying to say is
Right.
don't have this
I
metacognition.
think you can. I think you can compare it to, let's say, a baby suffering. So a baby may not have autobiographical knowledge of itself. Let's say it doesn't know that I am called Mike, and I just got hurt, and the pain is happening, and I need to go get some medication tomorrow. Or the pain might, let's say, the pain stops, and you may think, that this pain might trigger again tomorrow, and I need to do something about it, prevent it. So non-human animals, some of them may not have that ability to reflect and retrace its steps and foresee the future and see itself from a week from now doing something about it, etc. It doesn't have an identity. It doesn't have a self-awareness of it, in that sense. But that is all applicable to a baby, right? So if you, again, forgive me for the graphic example, like if I slap a baby in the face, the baby will not know that a hand came and slapped. Maybe not. I don't think it would. As hand came, this guy came in to slap me across the face, and that hurts, and it will just cry. It will feel this kind of intense pain around its face, which he doesn't even know he has. A face. He's not conscious of the fact he has a face, but he'll feel the pain, and that's why when babies are hungry, they cry. And I think that's a good analogy to certain forms of animal suffering, like a baby's suffering, where it doesn't have a sense of identity, but it still has intense and grotesque feelings of pain.
Yeah, I mean, I would distinguish between like cognitive abilities and emotional, or cognitive capacities and emotional capacities. So the cognition is, thinking about what's going on. This hand has slapped me. Why? What should I do to avoid it? All these sorts of mental processes. None of that is needed for pain. What's needed for pain is an emotional state. So the basic feeling of pleasure and pain and, hunger and thirst and things like that. And those, we actually have very good evidence that this is driven by what's called subcortical regions in the brain. So that's very basic parts of the brain that are shared throughout the animal kingdom and extremely widely distributed. And you can literally send electrons into these regions of the brain and generate emotional states. So if you send it into a person in this particular regions of the brain, they let's say the fear state, they'll suddenly tell you they're afraid, even though, nothing happened to them other than you sent electrons into this region of the brain. And if you do the same with an animal, they'll show you a fear response, hide or run or something like that. What's really interesting is that in these sorts of experiments, you can give animals control over the stimulus. And where you find negative type emotions like fear, they always switch those off. With positive ones, they'll always switch them on. In fact, they'll forgo food to get them for positive emotional states. So you just don't need any of this cognitive stuff. It's all irrelevant to sort of pleasure and pain. And these emotional states are very basic in the brain. They're distributed widely throughout the animal kingdom. But one thing I just want to say, lastly on this subject, is that what Craig has done, and it's not just Craig, C.S. Lewis and others have suggested things like this, is show us a way that the world could have been, right? He basically argues that animals don't suffer, but they can still respond to painful stimuli, right? So, and he says, we should praise God for his wondrous care of creation, that he's done this amazing thing and shielded animals from horrendous pain and suffering, right? So, yeah, if that had happened, maybe we should praise God for that. But given it didn't happen, given that it's not true, then we should be, criticizing or not believing in an all-powerful good God, because this hasn't happened. But he could have, right? God could have created the world in this way, but he didn't.
Yeah, I think they'll always continue coming up with any sort of excuse that they can think of, but will not accept that God is not good. I think yes, Mother.
Kylie, before you continue, I know you said you want to be here for an hour, so I'm just checking in with you.
Yeah, let's say another 10 minutes and then I should go.
Okay.
I just wanted to Yeah, I had just wanted to ask about one more theodicy, which is the compensation version that Muslims present, where they claim that animals will be compensated for their finite suffering that they go through in this world. They'll be compensated for that in paradise, but that will be a limited paradise for animals, after which they'll go into non-existence. So, what do you think about that?
Well, two things. So one, compensation and justification are not the same thing. So for example, imagine I'm like super rich and I just come up to you and punch you in the face, and then you're outraged and I say, look, how much money is it going to take to compensate you so that you'd be happy that this happened? And suppose you say, oh, give me $1 million, So I might give you $1 million. You're compensated, right? I would happily be punched in the face for $1 million. But it doesn't mean I was justified in punching you in the face, because it's still wrong to do it. So yeah, I might be compensated, but it doesn't mean you were justified. Furthermore, when we get compensation in cases, like say the company pollutes a river and the people who live around the river sue the company and they get compensated. Maybe they get compensated so much that they would prefer that it had happened and it didn't happen, right? So you might say, oh, everything's okay. But the company has limited resources, right? So they can't just give money out for anyone without any reason, But God doesn't have limited resources. So he can give the compensation without the suffering.
Exactly.
So if you can get the compensation without the suffering, then the suffering is still unexplained. So I don't think that works. Yeah,
I think that's all we
agree.
need
I
to
agree.
say about this here. Exactly, because God does not have to attach whatever compensation he wills to or he plans to give to animals or humans with a sort of suffering, right? Because he can give it to them without attaching any suffering. Yeah, totally
yeah.
agree.
And one
Exactly.
third
And
point. Sorry, one third point is that again, it's a sort of violation of parsimony, because you're basically having to appeal to another unseen thing. You've got to believe in this unseen God, and now you've got to believe in this unseen compensation. It's a bit like, imagine I was a fund manager and I said, invest in my fund. It's going to give fantastic returns on your money. You invest in the fund and every year it loses money. It's logically possible to say, yeah, but things will turn around next year. You will get the rewards eventually, but you never see them. There has to come a point when you never see the rewards and say, maybe they're not coming. So similarly, in this compensation argument, we're appealing to something that with no way we can check is actually real. So you're just shielding yourself from actual evidence, and surely a good argument should be based on evidence.
Absolutely.
Right.
So yeah, so that kind of reiterates what we've been the thrust of what we've been talking about is base these things based on the world data that we have so far, right? And instead of adding more assumptions into it, and that's how that's what a lot of theologians and theist philosophers miss, because they just try to find some sort of excuse, but they don't seem to realize that the excuse has to be part of the evidence as well. And if they're just in the same sense, you go to a court case and you prove that there was self-defense involved, you prove that there was this extenuating circumstance, you prove that there was some justification. But if you can just think of a logically possible justification in the far future, that's not enough. So even if you have this kind of heaven or paradise or compensation, which is far away into the future, we don't know whether that compensation will come along. And it's not part of the evidence as of yet. And therefore, that's why I think the problem, mainly the problem with evil arguments defenses don't really work, is because all of the defenses, they involve a possibility, not a probability. Yeah. And as you said, even if you kind of bypass that for a minute, if you just look at the structure of the theodicies that are presented, you can't just look at the theodicy and look for any sort of reason. The reasons have to be justified. I would even add it has to be a necessity. It has to be proportionate to the good that it's purporting to bring about, right? So you may think that I need to go to the dentist and I need to drill my teeth a little bit and get this, and that's going to cause a bit of pain. The dentist is going to cause me a bit of pain, and I have to do that. It's necessary so that I can live a better life, a higher quality of life. You may say that's necessary. As you said, God isn't limited by these resources, and it's not necessary to cause XY suffering in order to bring about that particular good.
So and yeah, and then there's the matter of proportionality. Is the good that is going to come proportionate to the harm and suffering that is happening right now, or something like that? And some of them isn't. You know, I mean, the idea of temporary pleasure that the animal will get, would that really outweigh the horrendous suffering that it's being incurred right now? It's difficult to say. So that part also is a bit ambiguous. I would say it's not very a priori not persuasive, right? So yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate to the viewers, you can't just, because these are things that we always get. You know, they come out with Theodicies. So the two main objections is that, one, the Theodicy, there's no evidence for the Theodicy. But even if we looked at it through an a priori form of possibility, is it justified? Is it proportionate? Is it necessary? And I don't think they meet those standards either.
Yeah.
All right, Phil, just last thing, there's a comment for you. I think you already, this guy has already seen your video.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if you remove a part of the brain, there are some things that you can't remove, but other things that you can. So there is a lot of plasticity in the brain. So if some bit goes, the brain could rewire itself and create the same function. Similarly, you know, animals could have different parts of the brain doing the same function. So the fact, even if it were true that the prefrontal cortex does self-awareness in humans, and suppose it's also true that no other animal has it, it could be that some other structure does self-awareness. So like I swim, you know, using my hands and legs and arms, doesn't mean a fish can't swim because it doesn't have arms and legs. They just swim in a different way. So similarly, you know, in fact, there's a bit of the corvid brain. Corvids are like birds, like ravens and crows. They've got a bit of the brain called the nidopadium quadrilaterale, and that's believed to create the same function as a mammalian prefrontal cortex. So yeah, different parts of the brain can do the same function as the bit of the brain that might be doing it currently. Yeah, definitely.
All right, Phil, one more request to you. There is a very old viewer of ours, a very good friend. He wants to ask you a question. Do you have a few minutes?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, and then I should wrap up and then get some.
Yeah. He at the very beginning, he asked me to have him, you know, ask you a question, basically.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
So, all right, Cosmic, you can join. I made the link public, and yeah, I think Phil, nice discussion. Really good to have you had here.
Thanks for having me.
One more thing is, when we try to, you know, bring this argument, you know, that animal suffering is a problem, and we give, you know, examples of thousands and millions of animals having died through extinction events, you know, I think just we only need to give just one example. Even if one animal is suffering for a millionth of a second, that's a problem for a good God, I think.
Yeah, good God.
If you have to just logically, yeah. I mean, what 2020 in Australian wildfires, probably 3 billion koalas and all these animals died, or something like that.
That's very bad. I don't think it would be that
yeah,
big.
I mean, they do keep dying, and so that's. I mean, I don't think that number makes it any worse. It just seems like hyperbole, or, you know, but even if one is suffering, I think it's bad enough for a good God, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Cosmic is here.
Yeah,
Cosmic.
hi everyone. Long time since I've been on, and I'll not try to take up too much of Phil's time. Phil, I'm a huge fan. I stumbled onto your debate with Subboor back in 2018, randomly last year. It's one of the best debates I've seen him at, and it's a shame that it didn't happen in a university or somewhere, you know, more organized. But the fact that you made him resort to calling you a racist and other accusations was
I think he called Darwin a racist. Oh, no, I think he did call me.
Cosmic.
He called you a racist. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Cosmic, can we ask you to tell where you're calling from? If you're fine with that.
Yeah, sure.
No?
Pakistan. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, Pakistan.
Okay.
Okay, so Phil, so Elliot Sober is a philosopher that he quoted in your debate, and I think he's used it again when you met him last year. Elliot Sober appeared on his channel a while back, and I emailed Elliot asking him a couple of questions. Are you aware that Subboor is a creationist and that he's using your work? And the fun part is that Subboor had Elliot on him, similar to how we have you, and he never clarified. This is how I use your work to undermine the case of evolution. He never mentioned this. So Elliot Sober, he responded to my email. He said that yes, I was aware that he was a creationist. I was not aware that he was citing my work. And then I linked him to one of your an excerpt from your debate, the 10-minute timestamp, and I was saying that Phil continuously kept telling him that you're misquoting Elliot Sober here, and he confirmed it. He said that Phil is correct. I have sent that email, blurred out the names and stuff, but his email is still there. Would you like to see this? And second, I had a suggestion.
That sounds great.
Since
maybe I should contact Elliot as well.
yeah, you can definitely contact him afterwards to confirm the authenticity of the emails that I sent you, because I could have doctored them. You should never. And then I loved your series on the fine tuning argument, where you got a bunch of scientists and philosophers to get down and critique it. I think if you have some free time, it might be nice, the 3 or 4 philosophers that Subboor quotes, as Elliot Sober being one of them, Michael Ruse I think is another one, and there are some others whose name. If you could get them on a call, show them the clips of Subboor using their work, and then have them say it, from the horse's mouth, that he's misinterpreting what that text means. I think that would be excellent. I think Subboor is about to have a debate. Yeah,
I'll definitely look into that. I've got a few other sort of projects in the works, but no, I'll put that on the list of things to do. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. That's very interesting to know. For those people, maybe we should just explain what the sort of misquote was. But basically, what I'm trying to remember now, it's a while ago, but from my memory, Subboor was saying something like, well, he was quoting Elliot Sober, saying something like, well, the similarity in function doesn't allow you to infer evolutionary homology, which is basically common ancestry, because they're functional. So, for example, that the very streamlined design of a shark and a very streamlined design of a dolphin, they just come about via other means other than homology. So basically, that's true. That's absolutely true. And Subboor quotes that as it's trying to undermine evolutionary relationship. But what he misses is the next bit, where he says those things that are not functional, that are similar, they are evidence of evolutionary relationships. So for a good example, there's like pseudogenes. These are genes that are, have been disabled in their function, but yet, when you look at the human genome and the chimp genome, you find that they have a lot of the same pseudogenes in a lot of the same locations. How do you explain that? Best explanation is common ancestry. So he sort of missed that bit and quoted the first bit, which is completely disingenuous, in my opinion.
I think.
Could you attach Phil's email in the StreamYard chat so I can send it to him now?
Phil's email. Phil, I'll post it.
Yeah, not in YouTube. I think the StreamYard one should be safe. I would imagine.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna post it on private chat, basically. Okay.
Yeah, if you forward it to me, that'd be great.
Yeah. All right. And what do you think about the upcoming debate between Professor Dave and Subboor? I think
I didn't know that was happening. To be honest, I haven't really followed that stuff for a while. I used to go to Speaker's Corner once in a while, not that often, but I subsequently found a better debate group, shall we say, that's not shouting all the time and personal attacks. It's much more polite. So I've just spent my time there rather than Speaker's Corner. So I haven't come a bit detached from what's been going on with those sorts of characters. So I didn't know that was happening, but it might be worthwhile sending my stuff to Professor Dave, that debate, because it'll, if you want to debate Subboor, you better do your homework and check what he says and check all the misquotes. So if you've done that, you're going to do very well, and if you haven't, you won't.
All right. Yeah. And for the listeners, do check out, as I said in the description, Phil is also an enthusiastic astrophotographer. You're not a professional, am I right about that? Or you?
That's correct. I'm not professional. No.
So do check this his astrophotography Flickr account as well, and he has some really astounding images in there. I mean, I was really impressed with those. And
Thank you.
Phil has a really, I think it's about a 10-inch SCT, I think.
Yeah,
a
it's a
Smith,
9.25 inch Smith Cassegrain telescope.
yeah, a Smith Cassegrain telescope as well. So yeah, he has been through galaxies pretty much, right, around the world, around the universe, pretty much, right. So Phil, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you very much.
really appreciate it, you dropping by. We enjoyed this conversation, and if you get a chance and you feel like coming here, you're always welcome. I'm gonna shoot you email if you would like to come again and discuss different topic. But once again, from all of us, thank you very much. We really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me on. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Phil.
All right, guys. What do you have in mind? Cosmic, do you have any thing in mind for the topic?
No, nothing from my side. I actually joined very close to the end. I had the notification on, but I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I
wasn't that
realized
sure.
because I didn't even realize that your comment went missing for some reason.
So the second account that I have, I think this gets flagged as a bot or something. My main account doesn't. That's
Do
why
you
some of my
usually
comments.
do you usually use that account for spamming?
No, no. मतलब I have typed a couple very like detailed comments underneath Cass's channel and a couple other Muslim channels, but this gets this generally goes down as a bot sadly, so nothing makes it to any of those people.
So this killer comment, this guy about debating Subboor, I think Phil has made a very good point about making sure that you know what Subboor's usual points are. If you're not aware of them, you might get sort of surprised at the kinds of
Stifled,
points these are.
stifled, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And you'll be like, okay, so what would I mean, because if you have not dealt with those kinds of points, then it might be a bit difficult to deal with it. Because I'm not sure if Professor Dave has heard about that homology assumption point that he keeps bringing up. So if he has not dealt with it, I think he'll keep on saying that he will keep on circling around that point continuously. So I think, and because that is his main argument, I think I'm not sure if he's changed that point now, but
Yeah.
as far as I know, when I
I
last
think,
checked him, he was using that as his main argument.
I think a good strategy when debating with people, in general, who may make citations and references, is to have an advanced access to what citation references that they will use. I know that's laborious thing to do, but it's actually a feature of law as well. In a legal proceeding, you have access to the opponent's evidence, and the reason for that is so that we can prepare. Right? There shouldn't be any surprises. And that same principle, I think, should apply to a lot of debates, particularly with the debate with Subboor, simply because he's one of those guys who churns out millions of references. Well, it's not always possible to know on the spot live to be able to check people's references. It's not possible, and that creates an unfair debate climate where you end up having to assess the evidence or assess the references weeks later in order to debunk it. A good strategy would be to agree with Subboor that, listen, if you're going to make references and citations, we want to know the literature that you're going to be citing, and you can't go beyond that, right? Explain the pages that you're going to use, the reference you're going to use, and the things that you're going to mention. And if you do refer to anything else, you can't. It'll be dismissed in the debate. That way, we can control the debate, and I think that would be an effective strategy to literally destroy Subboor, because with preparation, you're going to be able to just debunk him straight away.
Right.
Yeah,
And I
their
find that
strategy has always been to name drop, basically, name dropping, and then just, it's I think he does bring references as well, but I think yeah, I'm pretty sure Professor, it's going to be a shouting match basically. You know, it's going
Yeah,
to be an insult match basically. What do you call,
yeah,
whatever you want to call
totally
it
agree.
basically.
Totally agree. The kind of
Yeah,
attitude both
both
of
of
them
them are
have,
going to be.
both of them are quite aggressive. And
Yeah.
I mean, what Mahathir just mentioned, I think it's a very good and I think a productive way of debating. I think because otherwise, what I feel like is the whole concept of debate, a live debate particularly, I find it a very weak sort of discourse, generally speaking, particularly if you're not there to have a sort of a collaborative discussion instead of a proper debate where you're trying to debunk the other argument, other guy's point. Because you know, in a live debate, I mean, the only thing that you're testing is the other guy's quick wits or the quick thinking or how quick can he think. But that is not the best way to prove whether someone is right or wrong. I think the best sort of discourse is where one person completely presents his point without any sort of interruption, and then other person gets the time to look at that, listen to it again and again, think through his points, provide a detailed response after thinking through it. So I think the best way is to actually make a video on the topic, then the other person reviews it, kinds of argues against it, and then in that way, I think I find that sort of way a lot more fruitful. Actually, you get to know each other's best arguments that way instead of just
Yeah,
the
but
best
even Mahadan,
argument that
what
you can
Mahadan
think
is
of at the moment. Yeah, even what Mahadan is saying is a
even
very good
Mahadan,
way
what
of
Mahadan is
improving
suggesting
the
is
debate.
pretty good,
Yeah,
because at
it's
least
very
in
good.
that
Of course,
case you,
totally agree.
yeah, when
Totally
you're
agree.
having a live debate, that's
Hmm.
the best format you can say, because then at
Exactly,
least you
exactly.
have
No,
all
totally
the
agree.
evidence, or yeah, right,
I totally agree
Yeah,
that that is a way of improving the live concept of live debates.
yeah.
right.
I mean,
It's a very good way
it's
of
why
improving it.
legal proceedings in the UK and the United States are like that. There is a concept of a right to a fair trial, right? And when it comes to a fair trial, one of the principles that emanates from of the right to a fair trial is access to the opponent's evidence, access to the prosecution and the defense's evidence, so that you can make a sound preparation. And if there's any surprises in the middle of the trial, you can literally go to the judge and say, "Look, this wasn't exposed to us. This wasn't told to us. This is inadmissible." Right? And they can't admit that evidence, or if it is admissible somehow, let's say it's emergency evidence that just arose in the last couple of days, and we couldn't disclose this to the opponent on time. The court proceedings will come to a stop for a bit, giving the opponent time to look through the evidence, and then it will commence again. So the court proceedings are designed, and technically a court proceeding is somewhat a debate, but the debate is engineered in a
Yeah,
way so that the truth can arise. I know that sounds
Yeah,
paradoxical.
the
We think
opponents
the
are given
court,
fair chance basically.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we think courts stereotypically are exactly where the truth doesn't arise, but that's just a cliche. Is designed in a way to ensure that the proceeding arrives at the truth, and there are mechanisms in place to ensure that. And it's why there is no time limit to court cases usually, right? If for example the defense's closing statement or the prosecution's closing statement can go on as long as it usually they need, right? Because this is not a game. It's not a game. It's not like in 5 minutes explain the
yeah,
case for your side. It's not a game. It's about life and death. It's about truth. And if you need 30 minutes to summarize the truth or comprehensively disclose the truth, then you're going to need 30 minutes. So the courts are designed in a way so that we can ensure the truth arises most of the time. And these sort of mechanisms and tips and tricks that you can get from the court, I think would apply in any other debate setting. Obviously, in real life, when it comes to these sort of debates, it's entertainment. You want to generate views. There's also practicalities involved. You can't have a 10-hour debate or 20-hour debate without losing interest. So it's not. What I'm saying is probably not going to be bought by the mainstream audience. But if there's people who are interested in real debates that are tilted towards fairness, tilted towards the truth, so that the truth can arise, they will incorporate some of these techniques that are used in courts.
Yes, right. And I totally agree. And you see, um, I think the people who insist on live debates, um, I don't admire them very much, generally speaking, unless unless in very specific contexts. Because what is the point of a live debate? What are you going to test there?
I think
Why don't you
most of the
just
time
present
they are
your point?
seeking an easy win, basically.
Exactly,
Yeah,
because they think that they'll be
because
able
they
to
are better
manipulate their
rhetorician,
audience.
and then they can
Yeah,
just
through
get the
that
better of the
exchange,
opponent.
they'll be
Yeah.
try they'll try to overpower through maybe debate tactics. You see, if you're there to use your debate tactics, I don't think you're there to actually win the argument. You're there to win the debate. So, and I think it's very different between whether whether you win the argument or whether you win the debate. So even if you look at the video in which Sabur actually tried to uh, entice Dave into having a live debate, the way he said, he tried to bring that up. It showed that he just wants a debate and he wants to use his maybe debate skills to win this case. Why do you want
No,
to
I
do
mean
that?
you're
Just
right, and
refute his arguments.
you're
Why would you why would you say that you see these people are coward, and these people, the cowardice of these people usually is visible in debates. And I mean, what has argument got to do with cowardice or bravery? An argument is
I
right
mean,
or
you
wrong, so
you know
just
the outcome of that
yeah,
debate. If it happens, I think Subur is
yeah,
gonna win, and because he's
both
a
are gonna win,
better tactic. Yeah.
both are gonna win and both are gonna lose.
No, I mean in a
Yeah,
sense, chest thumping way, basically,
yeah,
because
exactly, totally.
this
That's why I said
yeah, yeah,
both audiences are going to say that
right,
their champion won. Exactly.
yeah. I think
Yeah, and I have been kind of pining for a debate, where one side gets definitively thrashed. The problem is that some of the debaters on the other side are either not particularly intelligent or may
Hmm.
have big ego issues. So with Dr. Dave, I think Dr. Dave has the capacity to thoroughly embarrass Sabur, but I think he also has an ego. So I
Ego
think
issues.
he there's a
Yeah.
definitive like possibility that he might not watch any video of Subur or very very few.
Yeah.
And then because the exchange of your sources that Martin was talking about, interestingly enough, Phil, who we just had on the channel, he asked Subur to do exactly that. On the Kalam cosmological argument, they
Hmm.
swapped their
Hmm.
supporting materials and then debate an university, and Subur refused. Now, with the case
Hmm.
of evolution, he can't refuse because all of his stuff is already out there. But if
Hmm.
this was Subur's first debate, he wouldn't do it. And what these people need to realize is that while on the Christian side there are like a couple people, Kent Hovind and Ken Ham, and I think there's a couple others. So even if you beat like Kent Hovind in a debate, Christians could just say, you won debate against X speaker, but you wouldn't be able to win against Y speaker. With the Muslim side, it's really just Subur. If you beat him definitively, that's it.
Oh,
There's
you
no one
forgot.
else.
You're forgetting someone. You're forgetting
No, but
another famous. You're
Hijab.
forgetting a famous
yes,
biologist.
but he's only popular or known in the subcontinent, right? So Subur is
Yeah.
basically just
Oh, the
and
the
Yeah. Yeah.
the
yeah.
QAR power.
Mhm.
Famous
Uh,
biologist. You're
yeah,
forgetting.
the famous biologist, right? Famous everything, man. Famous, famous Nobel Prize winner as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think these guys are capable. I mean, Subur and these guys are capable of dragging anybody into their debates, and with rhetorics, they can just beat them up. I mean, you would have seen that debate between Alex O'Connor and Subur, right? I mean, and even Alex's debate with hijab. I mean, these guys won't understand, and they'll just. I mean, the crowd is such that it'll claim a victory over there, pretty much, right? Say they, even if Alex's arguments were much better, it seemed so that he lost the debate, at least by the reaction of the crowd present over there, or the way it was presented by Hijab and company, right?
You know,
So
anytime recently someone has brought up one of those debates or any debate that the QAR guy has done, and this be it in real life or on Reddit, you know, when they say, you know, they beat the atheist or something, I always ask them, what argument did they make, you know, that was so convincing that you thought the atheist lost. And to date, I have not received a response from anyone, absolutely anyone, because they don't remember the contents of the debate. They just remember
Yeah,
the
the feel,
expressions,
the
the
overall,
feeling. Exactly.
yeah, the feel of
Yeah,
it. Like, okay, yeah, no,
yeah,
he feels
I
confident.
think,
He feels, and he
yeah,
doesn't. Yeah.
yeah. So I think I've asked maybe a dozen people who came up to me. They don't know my leanings in real life, but a number of people, either online or in real life, you know, have talked about, you know, how the atheists got owned. And I always just ask them, you know, what argument do you think that owned them? And no one so far. Like the sample size isn't particularly big as of yet, but still, like no one has given an answer. It's just always, you know, you could see how he was shaking, how he was looking at his phone or something along those lines. It's quite sad.
all right, Madan, anything else to add? Shall we shut down the stream? Anybody else wants to join and say a few, things about the conversation we had on the animal suffering, or any other topic if you want to maybe chat
Yeah,
for a
so if
few minutes.
anybody's watching, if you want to come on, but I kind of foresee who would want to come on, and there's only one person who wants to come on. So, well,
Is is there is there a board saying no entry?
well, I mean, I'm not disallowing anything. I mean,
No. Who are you talking about? I don't even know. I just said no entry.
no, I mean, if people want to come on, just come on. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Just come on. Just come on. Yeah. Anybody. I'm just kidding. And oh yeah, I mean we have a few regulars. I saw Bilal as well commenting. Muda Daku is also here. So yeah,
You
Cosmic
made
of course
you made the
joined
link,
after a long time. Yeah,
you made the link public, right?
I did make the link public, so I'll just paste it another time basically. So anybody who wants to join and talk for a few minutes or so uh, is more than welcome. Yeah, here's the link.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about animal suffering in the context of God and whether it's reconcilable with a good God, your Islam, is the concept of animal suffering such that it disproves Islam? Why would Allah allow the millions, the billions, the trillions animals that have existed throughout world history? Why would He
Yeah,
allow
sure.
these animals to eat each other, kill each other, brutally harass each other in virtual
Yeah, I mean,
silence? When I say what I mean,
imagine that. Sorry,
go on.
Madan, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah, in virtual silence. What I mean is silence, as in right now. Right now, there's probably a rhino being eaten alive by a two lions, horrifically.
Yeah,
Or a hippo or a baby hippo being tortured to death.
or
And
imagine that water buffalo in Indonesia or some place where a Komodo dragon has just
yeah,
uh, you know just bitten it and left it there to rot for another month or so and slowly dying basically.
yeah,
Or those
the great,
wildebeests in Masai Mara or Serengeti who are just stuck in the water basically to be devoured by
yeah.
crocodiles, right?
And
So
just the very idea that these animals have to consume, hunt, predate, capture other animals in order to survive. Why couldn't it be the case that animals could photosynthesize like plants and create their own source of energy and nutrition and survive in that way? Why couldn't it be like that? Instead, in order to just live another week, animals need to go and find another animal and literally kill it and then
eat it, take its carcass, strip it of its flesh, and get the energy that way. That seems to be highly a torturous thing to do, and that's immense torture. Why couldn't God just design these animals like plants, or bacteria, or certain self-sustaining forms of microorganisms? And even if you had to do that, why couldn't animals just be like robots and have no pain sensors, cortisol, not lack certain brain regions like plants? It seems to be a lot of horror and terror. And people say life is amazing, life is, it's not. If you realistically look at life, it is a combination of chaos and good things, but a lot of chaos. And if one person just lived in the wild for a while, you'll come back traumatized by the amount of suffering that's going on. How would a religious person explain all of that? How would they reconcile? I'm saying it like this to provoke the audience a little bit. Like, come on.
No, I agree. That's why I'm a vegan right now. That's why Madin is a vegan as well. Although Madin cheats a little bit here and there. I don't do that. When I say I'm a vegan, I'm a lacto-vegan, by the way. Yeah, so I quit eating meat quite a long time back, basically. And so when I say I'm a vegan, I'm not just a vegan. I call myself ethical vegan, basically, because I realize that this suffering should, at least one person can stop. Then it's for the betterment of animals, basically. So it's not that I don't find it appealing. That craving for meat is immense, but then you have to reason with yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you're thinking about like a greater good or something that can come about it, then you need to think about, first of all, you need the evidence of the greater good. It's not enough just to think of a theoretical possibility. You have to think of a probability, as we've discussed with Phil. But even in theory, the greater good justifications or the Theodicies that you think about, they have to inherently make sense, right? And as we discussed with Phil, and Phil has affirmed as well, the greater good or any other form of theodicy has to have justifications behind it, right? And as I added, you have to show things like it was necessary, and it was proportionate, right? And as I elaborated before, with the example of the dentist, you may get a toothache and you may need to drill into your teeth, and that's going to cause some suffering. But you will think, given the state of the world and given the resources that humans have, given the limitations, that's the best thing that the dentist can do. The only way to stop that severe pain that you have in your teeth is to have a root canal, and only by undergoing the root canal, which will cause some suffering, you stop the continuation of that acute suffering that you are having, right? Because it was a necessity. It's almost a necessity. But if technology, and maybe this is the case already, if technology made it so that you didn't have to undergo that, for example, you can avoid the root canal by having a pill. You take the pill and it just fixes the problem. The teeth falls out or whatever, right? Then it will be highly, highly troubling to think that the dentist is insisting that you must drill into your teeth. It'll be like, wait, do I need to absolutely do this, or why can't you just give me that pill?
Exactly. Right.
It's no longer a necessity, right? It's no longer a necessity. That's number one. So you have to show why God had to use that means, to bring that good. If you have to show that, just like the dentist has to show. And by the way, this is like within the bioethical framework as well, from like medical ethics and so on. We shouldn't undergo a horrific procedure if there are equally good alternatives, because it's no longer a necessity. And advocating for this kind of horrendous sort of procedure when there's a non-surgical procedure available that has the same, if not better even, effect to cure the problem, it'll be highly immoral of the doctor to suggest, undergo this surgery that will cause a lot of pain or something like that. But then, because it's not an absolute necessity. The second part is that, is it proportionate? If the anguish and the pain and the suffering to be quenched or to be stopped requires even more anguish, pain, and suffering, then it's not proportionate, right? So even if it's an absolute necessity to undergo the root canal, but the root canal itself was so bad that it didn't outweigh the suffering that you're having from the acute pain that you have in your teeth, that it's not proportionate. So then even if you show that God has a reason, you have to show it's necessary, but then you have to also show that it's proportionate, right? And some of the pains and anguishes and torments that God purports was absolutely necessary isn't like that. It's the good that they're trying to bring about isn't proportionate to the suffering. So let's put it in a different context. Like let's say it's a rape happens, and the reason for that rape is for a greater good, and the greater good is that it builds the soul of their relatives. They become better people. Well, it doesn't seem like it a priori that, first of all, that's not, for a God, that's not absolutely necessary. So it fails the first test. But let's hypothetically assume it was absolutely necessary for that rape to occur so that her relatives can become better people. They can be more charitable. They can be more, they become more resilient, stronger as human beings, or whatever it is, right? If that's not proportionate to the horrific suffering that the girl had to undergo in order to bring about that good end, I mean, if their souls are built, well, a little bit, whatever, that doesn't seem proportionate to the horrendous rape that she had to undergo, and the psychological torment and the continuous psychological torment that will follow for years to come. So then you have to explain,
for lifelong, right?
Yeah, you have to explain how that rape is outbalanced by the gains of the purported good that's come about from it, right? And that's an a priori conversation. When I say a priori, I just mean based on ethical, analytical thinking, balancing the goods and the bads, and so on. And most theists just don't talk about these things at all, and they don't even go into the depths. So yeah, I'm just telling this to the audience because the audience is not coming on. Whoever wants to defend theology, their theology here, but that's what you have to do. Yeah, that's your job. The job is to show that there was a good reason, that there's evidence for this reason. One, yeah, that it was absolutely necessary, and it was proportionate.
Right. Yeah, Madan, nicely explained. Shall we? I don't think anybody else is joining. Shall we take a few comments and then maybe shut down the stream? Or I think I highlighted some of the comments, so maybe not needed. I'll just probably highlight last two. Killa wanted to join, but he says no mic, but will now to have it for next time. For me, even though I do eat meat, suffering is an argument for me to show God cannot exist, and if it does, then deserves no respect. All right. Muta says Mufti Wajidi would answer your question by just saying Allah ki marzi. Yeah, I think Mufti Wajidi jo hai wo, I think, yeah, he's a league beyond pretty much. But he's a nice person. I always, whenever anybody takes his name, I always mention that. I do not fail to mention that he's a nice. It seems like unless until you openly go and tell him that, oh, you're wrong. But all right, guys, what do you think, Kelly? Anything else to add? Cosmic, Madan?
No,
I don't think anybody else is joining, right? All right, guys. Then I think that was
nothing
the
from my
stream.
side.
All right, sorry. One thing before we leave. All right. Hold on. If anybody has anything to say, I'm gonna present my contingency argument here. And my contingency is this, basically, that you can see now. That's my contingency. Can you guys see it? And yes, guys, if you can support us, if you are financially well off, doing well, and can support us, then do think of supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/philosapiens or buymeacoffee.com/philosapiens. You can also support us through super chats or memberships. Basically, if you do get memberships, that's gonna be good. Madan, I'm getting a echo from your side. Yeah, and then make sure, if you can't do that, if you're not capable of doing that, the way you can support us still tremendously by sharing our channel, liking our videos, commenting underneath the videos, by uh, being active in commenting on why you like an argument, why you don't like, or whatever, however you wanna just critique us, basically. And there's another channel of ours that is English only, that's Unveiling Faith. Just go and subscribe to that as well, like those videos over there. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put more content in over there as well. So guys, that's it for today. Cosmic, thanks for dropping by, and thanks to my co-hosts Maden, Kali. It was a nice stream. See you guys later.